Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Tom Rivera. I'm the Emeritus Associate Dean for Undergraduate Studies here at Cal State. And today we will continue our oral history of South Fulton project. We are at the Fowle Library on the fourth floor. It's about 1:30 in the afternoon. And our guest this afternoon, but before I introduce our guest, I want to thank Mr. Henry Vasquez, who's part of our oral history committee, and Mr. Frank Sosa, who's our camera person for this afternoon. Thank them both very much for helping with the project.
Thank you.
Our guest this afternoon is Mr. Randy Sosa. Randy is retired from Caltrans, and he's been retired for many, many years. And Randy, thank you very much for being with us this afternoon. Our purpose is, as a project in studying South Fulton, is to find out about your dad. Your dad was quite active in South Fulton in the 50s and 60s, and being quite active, he always wanted to discuss and encourage people to take an active part in educational issues, in political issues, in social work issues, and also in cultural issues. And he wanted everybody that lived in South Fulton to get involved and participate in some of those issues. So why don't we just start now? Tell us about your dad. Where was he born?
My father was born in Leon, Guanajuato, and he came when he was about 16 years old during the Mexican Revolutionary War. And he came because they were going to draft him into the army. So what he did was they would go and do physicals. The physical meant that they would grab him and pick him up, and if he weighed enough, or they put around his shoulder here, and he was big enough, they would get drafted. And so anyhow, he got a notice. So what he did, he just took off and came up to Topeka, Kansas. And later on, after the war,
before that, being inducted into the Mexican Federal Army.
Right, Federal Army.
And the induction process was, if you look strong enough and your
right.
biceps are big enough, you're in.
He didn't care what age it was.
And how old was your dad?
He was about 16, but he was a skinny guy, right?
Uh-huh.
So he wasn't very muscular.
So he said, that's not for me, so I'm getting out of here. And where did he go?
He came into Topeka, Kansas.
Uh-huh.
And then when the Depression came,
What did he do at Topeka, Kansas?
He worked at the railroad, and then he'd work at the slaughterhouses. So when the Depression came, he came out here to pick oranges, and that's how he ended up in Colton.
So that was back in the 30s and 40s?
Right, and he actually ended up in Guasti, and he used to make alcohol, and they caught him and a guy by the name of Pete Sierra, and they threw him in jail. Except afterward, they found out that they were just employees, and he was only in jails for a few days.
So Wasti is just a few miles from Colton.
Right,
maybe
near
about 10
Ontario.
miles or so.
Right.
West of, off the 10 on the, west of Colton,
And
near
at
the
that
airport.
time, there were nothing but grapevines over
Yeah.
there. There wasn't any buildings or anything out there.
Yeah. So anyway, your dad kind of thought he was going to be a bootlegger, eh?
Right, that's
Muscle
well,
men.
he's looking for a job.
Was
Yeah.
it during the Prohibition, probably?
Yeah. And then when he came to Colton, then what he did was he was a barber,
Uh-huh.
and he would go around people's houses. And they would give him things during the for his work.
Now-
Sometimes they would pay him. A lot of times they would just give him things, food or clothing.
So when did he come to Colton?
He was
What
in
years?
it was in 1934,
34, he came to Colton?
and he lived there on N Street, right next to Sonny Abril's house. It's an empty lot.
Well,
The house
between-
later on burned down.
Between 10th and 11th Street
Yeah,
on N
right,
Street,
right,
okay,
yeah.
all right. And you said to survive. Was he married then?
He was married. He actually, when he was 16, he came to pick a Kansas, and after a few years later, he went back to Mexico. And we don't know whether he married my mother or not, but she had 2 kids. And at that time, when you cross the border, there was nobody at the border.
Okay.
You just walked through. And so when the kids must have been 3 or 4, the two older ones. And when they came through, there was nobody at the border. So they came across, and they went then in. From there, they went into work in the mines in Denver, New Mexico. And the 2 older ones used to say that they were born in Denver, New Mexico, but they weren't.
Mhm.
But the courthouse had burned down, but they had the records because they were baptized in Denver, New Mexico. And then when the mines closed down, that's when he came up in about 1934. He came up to California.
Uh-huh.
And his brothers used to, they used to be with the revolutionists. They would go with the revolutionists to fight with them. So my brother didn't want to be in the army because he was going to be shooting at his brothers, right? So he brought him into Denver, New Mexico, and when the Depression closed the mine down, the brothers went back to Leon, and he doesn't know, never knew anything about his family.
So when your father's brothers went back to Mexico, now, in coming to Colton, you said about 1935 or 34 or so, and you said that to make a living or provide for the family, he became a barber.
Right.
And then he would go around the neighborhood and solicit business, and he would get paid by whatever,
By
either
whatever.
money or chickens
or
or
whatever.
food or a favor.
Right.
So kind of a bartering system.
Right, a barter
that they had.
system, right.
They had that.
That's what they had.
Okay. And then tell me, how many brothers and sisters did your mom and dad have?
My father had two brothers, and my mother had a brother and 3 sisters.
Uh-huh.
2 sisters, and the 2 sisters were nuns. And the brother, I don't know what he did, but he eventually moved into Mexico City, and there's where the Lopez family is. It's in Mexico City, and we don't know what happened to the Sosa family.
Okay. And then when they came to Colton, your mom and dad had a large family.
Yeah.
And how many brothers and sisters did you have? Who was the oldest one?
We have 4 brothers and 5 sisters, and my sister Porfiria, she just died about 3 or 4 months ago in '92.
When was she born?
92 minus 74, so that
Uh-huh.
was way back when, down there.
The mid 1915 or so?
Yeah.
See? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then that's the oldest, and then who followed?
Then came Librada,
Uh-huh.
and Porfiria, she was mostly a stay-at-home mom, but Librada turned out to go to Valley College and go to Berkeley, and she became a public health nurse.
Mhm.
And then came Irma, and Irma also became a nurse and marriage therapist. And then came Telvina. Telvina was also a nurse. Between that, there was my brother, and my brother did engineering at Caltrans.
What was your brother's name?
Edmundo.
Edmundo?
Yeah,
Okay.
but he was born in the United States,
Okay.
we think.
Mhm.
Right, we think. And then came me, and then came my brother Carl.
And you said me, when I introduced you, I mentioned that you recently retired from Caltrans. You were an engineer with Caltrans?
And I was middle management. I was senior engineer. That was middle management.
And how long did you work for Caltrans?
I put in 44 and a half years at Caltrans. Yeah, but a couple of the years were in the Army, and so that all that counted.
So you're a veteran also?
I'm a veteran.
Of which war?
It was between the Korean War and the Vietnam War.
Okay.
And I got to go to Korea and they got to go to Vietnam. At that time, they called them advisors.
Mhm.
And we were converting in Vietnam, we were converting the, one of the schools into a camp for the soldiers.
Mhm.
And in Korea, we were building hangars, and we had a lot of work on the DMZ. We were putting in radar stations, bunkers, and quads and huts for the soldiers to guard the DMZ. And you know, when I watch it on TV now, they have very nice buildings now in the DMZ. And the Seoul airport was just a little landing strip made out of asphalt.
Uh-huh.
And when we were there, we made all the aggregates for the airport.
Mhm.
And when they had their the games there, the Olympics, I got to see the airport. It's a big airport with tremendous,
Big changes, eh?
big changes, right?
After you, who followed after you? That was
Yeah.
your sister?
Well, no, after me, my brother Carl, no, my sister Ada.
Ada.
And my Ada is.
Tell us about Ada.
And Ada has a PhD in poli-sci, and she taught at Davis. And she was the
University of California at
at
Davis.
the University of California. She was one of the first Chicanas who had a PhD, period, in the whole nation.
Uh-huh.
There was just a handful of them at the time. And she was director of the Chicana study program.
And then after her came Omar.
And then came Omar, and Omar is an endodontist. And then came Carl, and Carl is a CAD operator. He draws the plans up on the computer. That's
Uh-huh.
what Carl does.
So you've had quite a large family and quite successful in the area of nursing, the health careers, and also engineering.
Right.
That's engineering. That's quite an accomplishment, Randy. Now, I mentioned before that your dad was kind of a unique fellow, eh? Your dad always did things out of the box, eh? He was just a very unique person that didn't seem to follow the cultural rules, eh? For example, he named you Espartalo.
Yes. Everybody had weird names.
Everybody in your family had
Librada. Omar is actually
Omar.
Tiberios. That is his real name.
What's his real name?
Tiberios.
Iberios?
Tiberios.
Uh-huh.
And now it's Alarhiza. And the only one that got an American name was brother Carl,
Uh-huh.
because my mother had all the babies at home except Carl. And my sister worked at the county hospital, so she got to name Carl.
Uh-huh.
My father had come up with some crazy name. He said, "No more of that." and named Carl Del Mar Sosa is his name.
And then the other thing that was unique about your dad was he loved classical music.
Yeah,
Classical music, you're in the barrio.
in the barrio.
In the barrio, he would play that classic music loud.
Yeah.
I remember when I was a little kid, third or fourth grader, I'd go to your house, and there was your dad listening to that classical
Yeah,
music.
that's right. He had the tapes.
Uh-huh.
He had the tapes, yeah.
Yeah.
When I was in Korea, he would ask me to go and buy all LPs for him. Because that time they were something like $3.
Uh-huh.
And then when I was in Korea, I could buy them for 95 cents. At the end of the month, I could buy them for 65 cents.
Uh-huh.
He would tell me, and I had to hear the music, and then I could mail that in because it had to be cut by the
Uh-huh.
needle, right? And that's what I really learned to appreciate Mexican music. Before I was like any other teenager. That time it was
The swing.
Johnny Cash and Elvis and
The swing.
yeah,
and the
right,
hip-hop,
right,
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
right. Sound like any other teenager.
Yeah.
But that's what I really learned how to Mexican music, right? And pretty soon I found out that the other guys were also buying the LPs, and I would get mad at them. Where do you buy them? Wait until the end of the month when we can get them for 65 cents.
Also,
Perez Prado and yeah, and those panchos. And
You're talking
that's
about
it.
the 50s. You're
Yeah,
talking about
right.
the 50s. Anyway, your dad also, getting back to his uniqueness, he always wore a chrome hat.
Yeah.
A chrome steel hat.
Chrome steel hat.
And it's actually a work hat from Kaiser.
Actually, right.
And he used it, we wore it all the
All the
time
time.
to his, in the community,
Right.
to all the meetings, to all the
Yeah,
rallies.
my dad was the treasurer of the Sociedad Progresista Mexicana. He would go all over the town to collect the dues.
Uh-huh.
And he did it for many years. He actually started in San Fernando, he started, they call him a logia, I guess it's a lodge.
A lodge.
Right, and he started one in San Fernando
Uh-huh.
with the old Verdugo family. They were the one that, the Verdugos used to own a lot of the ranches up in the San Fernando Valley.
Uh-huh.
And that's who the family was.
Yeah.
So
So your
it's-
dad was the treasurer for Los Progresistas, a mutual aid society.
Right.
And their purpose was to.
Insurance, death insurance. And when you died, they would give you X amount of money, and then they would participate in your funeral. And they
So-
would have, they bring in their flags and all their, people from, the state president would come over and they would have, they'd give you a very nice, funeral, right? That's what.
So
they-
it was a protection for burial services?
Right.
Okay. And your dad was a treasurer, and he went around throughout South Colton?
Yes,
And
picking
he-
up dues, yeah.
He would knock on the doors and say, "Your dues are due.
Dues are due, yeah.
Your dues are due." And, yes, go ahead, Henry.
I wanted to ask a question. I was reading, your dad's name was Luz Sosa. Did they call him that, or did he have a nickname?
Mostly they call him by last name.
Oh, really?
Sosa, right.
Okay.
And I tell a story about how well he was known. We were up in San Jose, and somebody stopped by and said, "Hey, Sosa, what are you doing here?"
Mhm.
He said, "Oh, I'm doing this, I'm looking for a job." And they told him, "Well, we'll find you a job. Here's our address. Stop by tomorrow, we'll find you a job." And they're talking, and it looks like somebody that he had known for many, many years. After they left, he turned around and asked me, "Who were those people?" And I go, "Wow." But he talked to them like he was really interested, and he could remember a bunch of stuff. He could remember, he would read stuff, and I remember he was talking to this French guy, and he was telling him about Paris, that there was the church over here, and over in this street there was a store, and there was this. And then the guy asked him, "Well, when were you in Paris?" I said, "No, I never been to Paris. I used to read the Reader Digest."
Oh,
Well, not only was
He was a character, yeah.
Well, he was a character, a bright character, though, very bright. Now, the other thing that was unique about your dad was that he encouraged his sons and daughters
Yeah.
to continue their education.
That's right.
How did that?
Yeah, he was always encouraging people. And there's a girl, her name, she has a PhD, last name in Mirandés, Alfredo Mirandés.
Yes. Also from your neighborhood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wife, and she would give them money for the A's that you got. And at the funeral, Eva was out there crying over my dad.
Mhm.
That's what my dad would do. He'd push everybody, go to school, get an education. He used to say that for him, this was like a fairy tale for him. When he died, he said, "If I can come back as a chicken, I'll come back." He didn't care, right?
So he said that this being in California and Colton was a fairy tale, a playground for him.
Right, a big,
Yeah,
like
a big
fairy
playground,
tale.
yeah, yeah.
So he
Yeah.
did a lot of recruiting, and that's why I think most of us went to school because we were very poor, I mean, just like you,
Yeah.
Nobody could give us the money. We had to go and get it however we could, right?
Uh-huh.
And I know Irma had a hard time. She was on welfare for quite a few years. Omar worked at Patton, the graveyard shift, and during the day he'd go to UCR. Yeah, and then when he went to dentistry, the one that paid for it was Marion. She was an RN. And
That's
he
his
paid-
wife, Marion is his wife.
Yeah, yeah.
Omar's wife.
And she paid for it. He used to work part-time at the probation there department.
Mhm.
He used to like it because all I would do was I'd take all these ex-convicts and go and play handball and talk to them, right?
Yeah. And anyway, yeah, that was another unique thing that your dad contributed to, not only the family, but also the community. Get an education. Get an education. And he did things that, that would help people get an education. For example, he encouraged the girls to run for queen
Right.
at the,
The 16 de septiembre.
el 16 de
Right.
septiembre, el 16 de septiembre.
And they used to have it at Patio Supremo.
And who was the organization that supported that? Was it the Congress of Community Clubs?
Yes. Yeah. Congreso de Unidos.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Trabajadores Unidos
The Trabajadores
also.
Unidos, right.
That was a union, that was a
Right.
union, yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
that's what it was.
So Congress of Community Clubs, los Trabajadores Unidos,
Yeah.
and los Progresistas would sponsor el 16 de
Right.
septiembre. And what was your dad's role in that activity in putting that project together?
My dad's role was to bring the music and to get the singer, because he knew everybody, right? In other words, to the people who were going to speak and the people who were going to play. And I don't know if you remember, but we lived on South Fifth,
Right,
and this one is at O Street.
right.
And you could actually dance in the back of the house on O Street. He had these big speakers. They were about this big. I don't know how many watts, I mean, many, many watts. You could actually dance. Ada had a house, well, we had a house on Fifth Street. Our house was condemned in 1945. And then Ada built a house in the next lot. And we could actually dance in the patio from his speakers all the way to Old Street.
Oh, the music carried that far?
They carried that far.
Oh, okay, okay.
We sit here and listen to it. Right? That's what my dad did.
Well, he also recruited the girls to participate and run for
Recruited
queen.
the girls to participate.
Yeah, because I remember Mary Luna now,
Yeah.
and she she ran for queen, and she said that she didn't want to, but your dad talked her into
Right.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So your dad was unique in the glib. He also knew how to convince people
Right.
and talk to
Right.
people. Yeah.
Yeah. And I encourage them and convince them
Uh-huh.
to do things that they were afraid to do, right? You know, right?
And then the other uniqueness was he was very involved in politics.
Yes.
Very involved with politics.
Yeah, he
To
was-
the point that they called him a communist.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well,
Tell us-
actually,
tell
that
us-
wasn't the reason they called him a communist. At that time, the unions were starting to organize, and the only one that supported them was the communists. Right? And I remember going, there was like a bull ring down around Fifth Street. They used to have rodeos, and the communists were there, so were the union.
So anyway, let's talk about the rodeo. It was on South Fifth, possibly the corner of Fog Street
No,
and
at Congress.
Congress.
It was from the plunge south,
Okay.
north, well, north of the plunge.
It was a Caldera Center.
Right.
It was a Caldera Center.
Right, yes, Calderas.
The Caldera Center, and Caldera had a plunge there. He had a
the
baseball
pool,
field.
Had a baseball field and had the rodeo. And I was a little kid, and I remember the wooden benches, right, like this, right? And the communists had a rally, and my father went down there to the rally, and they would give him $5 if you would sign up. And you had two lines, a line they would give him food and $5. Then you were supposed to stand on the other side. And then he did. He took the $5 home to buy food with.
Mhm.
But the reason why my father was one of the person who would do, he was pre-Cesar Chavez. He was the original Cesar Chavez. And him and another guy would do the unions. So that, and anybody at that time who was involved in unions, they were called communists.
Mhm, mhm.
They were called communists. And the only thing that my father did for the communists was, me and him, we went down here to the Santa Fe, and we helped unpack a Packard, a burgundy Packard with a brown top on it, for the president of the Communist Party at the time.
Mhm.
That's all he ever did, right?
Now, was he ever jailed or taken to court?
Yeah,
Or-
yeah.
Tell us about that.
They tried to deport him. And I think they had him up there in San Pedro ready to deport. We hired an attorney, and the attorney said, well, wait a minute. Prove to us, this guy he's a communist, but he was a unionist. Show us the record, because the communists kept records of everybody that signed up. Show us a record that proves that my father name or signature in it. And they couldn't do it. So the judge went bang, bang, bang,
And threw the case out of
and
court?
threw the case out.
Uh-huh.
And he was only there for, I think, about a month, right?
Mhm.
About how old was he when that took
I
took
imagine
place?
he was about 40, 45, 46 years old. Yeah. So that, but anyhow, so really, he was called a communist because he was a unionist, right? And he was one of the original founders of the labor union here in Cole. And afterwards, I don't know if you know Manuel Padilla.
Yes.
Why? Well, my dad helped him become the president of the union. That's what, he was an agent. Manuel Padilla was, helped him do that, right? And my dad worked a lot trying to get. I remember going to pick oranges down in High Grove, and my dad said, okay, him and Manuel Padilla said, no more work. They gotta pay us more money. They gotta pay us more money. So the guy who took us was told to go home with his truck. And we had to walk from High Grove back home because we didn't want to pick.
A strike, huh?
Right, a strike. A huelga, right, a huelga. Me, I was a kid. I was waiting for the huelga, you know.
You didn't want to
Because
work.
picking oranges was hard work. You
Uh-huh,
know?
uh-huh.
Yeah, that's.
So your dad was involved in the initial strikes in that area?
Yeah, initial strikes.
With the citrus,
Yeah.
against the citrus
And they threw
industry?
him in jail once too for that.
Uh-huh.
But they only kept him over over a weekend. Right?
Now, tell me about, you mentioned Manuel Padilla, who was
Yeah.
also an activist in Colton
Yeah.
and was involved with many activities. Who were some of the other friends that your dad had, or colleagues that he had?
I don't know, there was one guy who was Martinez. Se llamaba Declas Martinez. And he was also a unionist, right? But he also belonged to the Communist Party.
Mhm.
And that's a guy that had turned him in, right?
Mhm.
Saying my dad and other people, right? But when they went to the trial, my dad had never signed up, right?
Mhm.
He would get the money and spend it on food. They said, the hell with him.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. He kind of had what's the story about La Perra, right? They would give him things, food, and he would say, for my perra. And he would say,
Oh, for the dog.
for the dog, right?
Okay.
And then he would say, wait a they would say, but you don't have a perra, Señor Sosa. No, para mi perra hambre. That's what he would say.
Para mi perra hambre.
That's what he would say.
That's
But
a good-
those were tough times, you know. I would go to the park down on Old Street. It wasn't too much of a park at the time. And all day long, there was a bunch of group of people playing checkers and chess and stuff. And they would work when there was oranges to pick or go to Hammett to the apricot. Otherwise, they were like Tommy sitting around relaxing at the park, right?
So tell me, how bad was it, Randy? How poor were we in South Colton?
We were very poor. We were very poor. And luckily, the homes were very cheap. And for example, our house, brand new, was $1,800. My father bought it for $500, $5 a month from Trinity Bocanegra.
Ah,
From Trinity Bocanegra, he bought it, right? And the agreement was Trinity had to go to the grocery store to buy the groceries there. And I remember it wasn't until he finished paying the house that we could go to the Safeway in downtown Colton to buy the food, of course at a cheaper price, right? But it was tough for the rich people at the time were the ones like Dr. Tom's father who had a job. Those were the rich people.
So people that had steady jobs like the
At
railroad, the PFP,
or at the Slover Mountain.
or the Portland Cement,
Yeah, right, yeah.
or construction.
Right.
Okay.
But there wasn't too much construction going on during the Depression.
Uh-huh.
So it was tough for all, and picking the fruit. Right?
Picking the citrus.
Yeah,
Okay.
right, picking the citrus, yeah. So anyhow, it was tough for a lot of the families. Then the other families who were pretty good was the ones who were on welfare. But my dad had a joke about that. He would say, he was arguing with some guy, and the guy says to him, I had a farm and I had to grow my own food. And my dad would say, well, I had to cut hairs and live off of people who were on welfare. And the guy asked him, well, what was so bad about that? Well, when the Mexicans went to apply for welfare, they put it into Mexico. And that was true.
Well, that was another uniqueness of your dad, that he did not want to apply for welfare.
Right, and my dad didn't want to apply for welfare.
Right.
He would go and get the cheese from the welfare, and then by the time, they would give him big cheeses. Like I remember I went with him, and I could barely carry the cheese. And by the time we got home, he didn't have any, he only had a little bit of cheese, because he had stopped at people's houses. Oh, that cheese looks nice, cut a piece, and he lived it, give it to people along the route, right? By the time my mother would get mad, just all you got, you're supposed to get one. They would give us a big cheese for each person, right? By the time we had a little piece of cheese as well, that would give it all away down. She came down the.
So that was another uniqueness about your dad.
Yeah.
Even though he was very, very, very poor,
Yeah.
the family was very, very poor. He was very generous.
He was very generous.
He was very generous with his time and also whatever he had.
Whatever he
Like
had.
you said, the cheese. Yeah. Even though your mom got angry. because-
What's the rest of the cheese? We're supposed to bake 2 cheeses, right? Oh no, but those people, they don't have anything to eat. This is the only meal they're gonna have, right?
And
So-
besides Manuel again, what other friends did he have, or people that he hung around with the Progresistas,
Yeah,
the
Progresista.
Congress of Community Clubs, or Los Trabajadores Unidos? Yeah.
Also about the 3
And
clubs.
can you remember any of the names or any of the people that he participated with?
No, I don't remember. I do remember the Rivas, what was her last name? And she was very much involved. The older girl of the Rivas, she was very much involved with Trabajadores Unidos. I forget her name. I can still remember her. She was very, very much involved along with my dad. Yeah, along with my dad.
Yeah.
Tafoya, that was her last name. Tafoya, that was her
Tafoya?
last name.
Uh-huh.
I forget her first name. And her husband was also from Mexico. Ernestina was the little youngest daughter, the youngest sister. She was also a Tafoya. And she's the one that had 12 kids and was on welfare.
Mhm.
And they were always trying to deport the husband.
Yeah.
Because of the child support, right?
Okay.
And the husband would go and hide at her house. Well, come over here. I eat metes en el cuartito.
I tell you, your dad took chances with
Right, took
even
chances.
people that were being
Uh-huh.
hunted by the law.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, Randy, we talked about your dad's uniqueness. How did this affect the family? You know, like mom said, well, where's the cheese? Or people would say, how come you're wearing that silver hat, their hard hat? Or people would say, ¿Cómo te llamas? You know, how did that affect the family, his uniqueness?
Well, I think that's, to some degree, I think that's what the family was so successful, is because that's the way my father was. And when, you know, when my first sister went to college, we didn't even know there was a Valley College. And she comes over to Valley College, and then she finds out that she's one of they used to have cottages for the nurses. And she actually had her own cottage. And all the other girls, they were paired up, right? And afterwards, she would think, why was I the only one that had my own cottage? Because the other gringo girls didn't want to have a Chicana with her.
Oh, so segregation, discrimination back then, okay.
That was still
Where were those cottages? I'm curious about
I don't remember. I do have a picture of her at the cottages.
Do you think they were close to the college somewhere?
Yes, I'm sure they were close to the cottage.
Well, let us borrow that picture so we can include it into our program.
Yeah, that would be
I
neat.
gotta go and here's when she graduated, right?
Mhm.
And they were the cottages. So really, she was breaking ground.
Oh,
She
for
finally
sure.
was the first Hispanic, and then she goes to Berkeley, and her and one of the Carlos girls go up to Berkeley, right? And of course, they're all lost down there.
Mhm.
Jesus Christ, these two little chicanillas, I don't know. I mean, that time, who the hell went to Berkeley? Not even the gringos went to Berkeley.
Right, right,
Not even the gringos went to
right.
Berkeley. And so she really was.
So the uniqueness of your dad affected your family quite a
Affected the
bit.
family a lot.
Yeah,
That we did things outside the box, I guess.
I think you did. I think your dad did.
I know.
Well, when people ask me, Rivera, why did you go to college? I said, well, I met Omar Sosa as a third grader, and he's one of my best friends now. And through your family, I learned about college, and that's why I went to college.
As the Peter Flores, he would say, he would say, I used to go to your house because you were one of the very few families that actually spoke English. And I sit there and I wonder. They're like Manuela, her first 3 years in grade school, they didn't speak she didn't know how to speak English.
Uh-huh.
And I'm sure that there was a lot of families that the kids did not speak English.
Mhm.
And therefore, a lot of them, out of the 8th grade, that was it, That was all the schooling that they would get.
Mhm.
They would all go to work, My next door neighbor, he had 2 sons, and out of the 8th grade, they got married. They were usually like 2 or 3 years behind anyhow.
Mhm.
So instead of being 13, they were more like 16 out of the 8th grade.
Mhm.
And I would see the kids, right? What do you mean you're getting married? You just finished the 8th grade.
Yes, yes, yes.
But the truth was, they were already 16 or 17
Yeah.
years old when that was happening. Yeah.
And at that time, you didn't even need a high school diploma to get a job. Jobs were plentiful back then.
Probably.
Yeah, in the 40s,
Yeah.
during the war.
Yeah, during the
And in
war.
the 50s, yeah.
Yeah, well, my father's first job was in Yukon, building the naval air base. That was the first time he got a real job that you could say this was a real job, right?
And
Where you earn Social Security and stuff like that, right? But even there, at that time, there weren't even any workman's comp.
Mhm.
Because when he got injured, I was in high school, and when he got injured in March, and he told me, well, the good news and the bad news. The bad news was that as soon as I could have to go and find a job to support the family. The good news, that he had enough unemployment for me to graduate in June. And I didn't have any money to go to the proms and to go to the graduation party. In fact, the graduation party was paid by my girlfriend. That's who paid for that, because I didn't have any money. Right? Her father had a job, right?
Okay.
And my father was in traction for about a year.
Wow.
He was out of commission for about.
What happened?
When they were building the Kaiser Hospital,
Mhm.
the scaffolding fell down, and he fell down with it.
Mm.
There were no workman's comp at the time. There was unemployment, and that was it. And that only lasted until June. So when I graduated, I went to pick oranges. Then I went to work on construction, and I supported the family until my father was able to get back to work about a year later. So it was tough for me, and I took my education in high school. I went to Valley, I retook my algebra and all my math at Valley College. And then when I went to work in LA, I took the rest of the courses at East LA, at Cal Poly, and take courses at UCLA. That time it was easy to take the courses.
Yes.
I don't even remember, you could take it for credit or no credit, and you would just go and sign up. And, they had the courses at night, and they had them during the day, and they were looking for students. Now it's just the opposite, right? You have a hell of a time now getting courses now. But at that time it was very, very easy. They were always looking for the student. They would have the courses on Saturday. I remember going on Saturday. Yeah. Yeah. It was, but to some degree, it was still tougher because you didn't have any money and you didn't know where the schools was. You didn't know how to go and register at the school, right? I remember they would talk about prerequisite. What the hell a prerequisite? Because I would find a course and I take it, right? The hell with a prerequisite, right? They let me in. Then afterwards I realized, oh, Jesus Christ, I'm taking this course. I should have taken.
Well,
I was taking calculus 2, but I should have taken calculus 1. I didn't know that.
Well,
but the course were available and they would let me in, and I would just take it again, right?
Well, you see, Randy, I think you became like you're like your father.
Yeah, I
You
figured
became
out a
like
way
your
around
father.
the
Yeah.
system.
That you went ahead and did what needed to be done,
Yeah.
and other people wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
So you were also like your dad, unique in that way that you did it.
I was actually a cop for about 5 months. I got out of that. I was a carpenter apprentice, and I gave my apprenticeship to Johnny Rivas. He took it over. He would go to class with me, and then when I quit, I asked the contractor, Johnny Rivas would take over. Here would be 2 other classes. So Johnny Rivas became a carpenter and then became a contractor, right? And I was always looking for a job that was more interesting and that offered more security, because I saw how much problem my father had, and I was looking for that security.
So the experiences that your dad had, and the experience that your family had, motivated you to look at life in that would or occupation that would give you security.
Right.
Yeah.
Because see, my dad worked at Kaiser's, and then he couldn't handle the shifts, so then he went to work where they were. That time the company is called Day and Night. I don't think they're in business. Afterward, they became an air conditioner place. And they would make the shells for the artillery, for the big shells, you know. And that's what he would do. And he would get paid more than Kaiser's in the hour, was just during the day. That's what he did. He left construction, right? Because he also was looking for a steady job. But then when they weren't making any more artillery shells, then they closed down. It's called Day and Night. And they were afterward they were a heating. They used to build air conditioners after that. So and a lot of people that's what they did. You know, they worked in the defense.
Yeah.
Including the people who were 4Fs. You remember the 4Fs?
Yes. Yes.
The
Yes.
4Fs, yeah.
Yeah.
There was people who worked. They weren't drafted.
We're not eligible for the draft.
They were not.
Randy, if we were to look back and talk about the legacy of your dad, what do you think would be some of the comments that people would make about your dad's legacy and his contribution to South Colton?
Oh, I think that he cared for people, and that he was very friendly to everybody. He had a fantastic memory. He could remember people's names, the children's name, what the kids were doing. So when he talked to you, right away he could engage you in conversation, right? And right away you would think that this guy really is interested in me, right? And I think that was his uniqueness, right? And he included everybody, the whole community. Right? He included. He spoke a broken English. Is all he ever learned. my mother never learned English. Then he got my mother to be the president of the Progresista,
Ah,
so he could control the Progresista. So everything was run out of our basement.
and what year was that?
Oh, I don't remember, Jesus Christ.
Uh-huh.
It must be about 45, 46.
And how many members did you have at that time?
Oh, we had about 150. He had a board, and he had nails, and he had people's names on it, right? And he had month. So it's a big board. Then as they paid, he would move
Okay.
the names over. Get this paid all the way until February.
Okay.
So he had his own pegboard accounting system.
Oh, very good. I tell you, he was unique.
Yeah, remember they used to fight because according to the books, he had more money than they were supposed to have.
Oh, really?
So they were, how did this happen? They finally found out that the reason why was the money made interest. So the checking account was bigger than his ledger, right?
So he would accuse him of
I mean,
whatever,
yeah.
but nobody knew about interest.
Nobody knew about interest.
Now, had he taken classes in any kind of, like
No.
accounting or anything
No,
like
he had a
that?
third grade education.
So that was just in Mexico?
Yeah, it was just in Mexico. Yes.
So by the time that he was maybe like around 8 or 10, he didn't have any more schooling?
No, that's right. He had a third grade education, and my mother had a sixth grade. And my mother taught him how to read and write Spanish.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. He did really learn it well enough in school.
Mhm.
And then I remember my sister Irma taught him to read some English. And I always remember when we went into war with the Germans in 41, the headlines were we are gonna go broker. Of course, there's no word, just broker. It had a quotation mark, right? And my father was trying to figure out why they had a quotation mark. And my sister was explaining to him there wasn't such a word as broker, it was broke. And I still remember that. And I'm still waiting for this country to go broke. I'm still waiting for this country to go broke. But I remember the headline, because we were broke during the Depression. And actually it was the war that turned things around for us. And the word broker, and my dad was trying to figure it out, what the hell the word broker was. Yeah, I think he was very smart, and he had a photographic mind. I mean, he could remember so much detail, right? And it says he was very, very well known and very well liked. And they called him a communist. And he would smile, he didn't care. He knew what he was doing and what he wanted to do. He wasn't worried about that.
And he used to drive that 1947 Studebaker, the truck,
Yeah.
the little truck,
Yeah.
that little truck.
Yeah, well, he had several cars. One of them, the key didn't work right. He got the key stuck, so all he could do was turn it on and off. So then he would he had a chain, he would tie the car, like they do the bicycle, he would take it and he tied it to a post so nobody would steal the car away.
Oh,
But my dad actually had a new car. In 1928, he bought a new Chevrolet. I think it was $800 for
Wow,
a
that's
new
expensive.
Chevrolet. And he came out in California with it. And he loaned it to one of his friends. And the friend killed himself, rolled the car over. He got drunk and rolled the car over and killed himself. So my dad didn't have anybody to collect to. So during the Depression, he didn't have a car. He didn't have a car until when we went to Cupertino, and that was my freshman year. So that was about 1949 when he went and bought a truck, and it had a camper shell.
Ah,
A camper shell on the back of it. And I remember driving to Cupertino because my father couldn't drive real well. Jesus Christ, I was 13 years old, and I was driving to Cupertino,
Wow.
and I had a trailer, pulling a trailer.
That must have been scary.
Yeah, and when I was in Cupertino, I didn't have a license either, and I would actually drive a semi-truck into Milpitas, into San Francisco. I would actually drive it, and I got caught because my headlight went out. So they gave me a ticket, and luckily I was old enough. At that time, there weren't Class A or Class C's. There was only just driver's license. So we had to go to the judge, right? And the judge chewed out the hell out of my father and the owner of the truck, right? But by that time, I had gotten my driver's license. At whatever age it was, probably was 16 years old, right? It was really, I mean, that's how you
Well,
survive.
again, we're talking about the uniqueness of the family and talking about the legacy of the family. And Randy, I to this day, I think the legacy continues because you and your wife, Manuela, Dr. Manuela Sosa, Manuela became the first Latina in the Inland Empire, Riverside and San Bernardino County, to be the first dentist, Latina dentist in both counties. And then
She was actually the first female who had her own office.
exactly.
They were gringa female, but they were associates.
Uh-huh.
And Manuela was the first one to have her own office and her own corporation, right?
Right.
Yeah,
So again, that's very unique, being the first to do that. Secondly, I think both of you, 15 years ago, 16 years ago, started a scholarship. Would you tell us a little bit about your scholarship?
Well, we had done a scholarship back with Father Valencia, with Sonny and Frank Gonzalez. And there was just a few students that we would get. Right? Then afterwards, Manuela founded the Greater Hispanic Chamber of Commerce in Riverside, and we used to do it there. So then Manuela then used to have parties, and at the parties, like Congressman George Brown would come, and she would say, "No money, give me dollars," right? And she accumulated something like, I think about $23,000, right? And these were her party presents, right? So then we decided, well, we're gonna start a small scholarship, and it's gonna be small, and we're gonna have like 20 students every year, right? And we incorporated, we used, Joe Baca was, I think he was the assembly person, and we went and got our bylaws
The 501c3
yeah, the
designation.
501c3, and Joe Baca helped us there, and we started it. And we had the first event here at Cal State, over at the Commons over here. And we didn't have any student. We just had a fundraiser. And we think we gathered another 25,000. So we had about 50,000, and we said, all right, this is good enough, right? And it's been 16 years, and we have made as much as, one year we made 412,000. And we've given $1.8 million out, and we have earned 2.8 billion as of January the 31st. So it's gotten very big for us.
So when you give your scholarships on an annual basis, you usually give scholarships to about 200 people?
It depends. Actually, between about, this year we gave 110, last year we gave 136, and about 120.
So, but total numbers of dollars is about 200,000?
That we give, average is about 200,000.
200,000.
And we always thought that if we had a 50,000 every year, we'd be happy with that.
Mhm.
And it actually got much bigger than we ever thought
Mhm.
that would happen.
Mhm.
And it's a lot easier now to raise the money because we have the reputation.
Mhm.
And we can show them the student.
Mhm.
And we've gotten a lot of successes.
Mhm. Tell me about some of your students.
Well, we just this week, this boy called us up. His name is Jose Sarmiento. and he's been accepted to one of the top medical schools he's going to be a brain surgeon. So, I mean, we always wanted at least to graduate a doctor, and now we're going to be able to get a brain surgeon in there, like Quiñones, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we go, wow, you know. And now we find out that Evita Limon, she's going to quit her primary care at Kaiser, and she's going to go to UCI. She's going to go in, she wants to be a psychiatrist now. You know. And we see these students become successful, and we wonder, sure glad even if we had a little bit to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
And some of those students are like our children.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got that other superstar, Miguel. He's up there in New Hampshire, and he has, the doctors that work under him all have gray hair except him.
Mm-hmm.
There was a kid that we met when he was picking lettuce.
Mm-hmm.
That's when we met the kid.
Mm-hmm.
And we see the successes, and we tell ourselves, you know, no matter what, at least we know what we've accomplished.
And also, you've helped kids that are recently arrived from Mexico,
Yeah.
or people that are undocumented.
About 1/3 of our students are undocumented. And we do have Andrade, Alejandro, he was undocumented. All the way, and he used to pay triple. That was before the AB 540. And he's a doctor now. He's gonna work at Kaiser, at the Victorville Clinic, and his starting pay is $200,000.
Mm-hmm.
And that little kid used to sell paletas.
Mm-hmm.
That's how he paid for his school.
Mm-hmm.
He said he'd go to the soccer games.
5 minutes.
He'd go to the soccer games to sell paletas.
Mm.
That's how he paid
Mhm.
for his college. And
Mhm.
now he's a medical doctor now, and we go, wow, you know.
Well, the majority of your students, I think, because of Manuela's background, the majority of them are going to the health
Right,
sciences,
this is a
or
STEM.
the medical fields. Mhm.
We have a boy now, he's gonna be the first boy to get a PhD in mechanical engineering. He'll be done with his coursework this June, and we're looking, he's trying to find out what to do next, right? Does he go to work? Does he finish his thesis, become a professor? And we're bringing in the experts to advise him. And we've had the meetings with the deans, advising him what to do. Right?
Mhm.
And he's decided he's going to do what they call a postdoc, which is a research project.
Mhm.
Right? So then he would then have the experience and the teaching stuff done. So, and he's this very shy kid, right? Very, very shy,
Yeah.
extremely shy, right?
Yeah.
And now when you see him, Jesus Christ, you wonder, how the hell did that happen?
Well, it happened because
How
of.
the hell did that happen?
Yeah, because of the Sosas, that's what it
Right.
happened,
We
yeah.
actually wonder
So-
that, you know, to see.
Yeah, I want to ask Randy, God, Henry, I forgot your name for a minute there. Do you have any questions for
Vasquez.
Henry?
I
No,
think we've just about covered everything, and I think-
I wanted to ask Henry a little question. Why does he claim he's Indian? Because we know a lot of Hispanics who the Gonzaleses, they claim that they're Indians, right? And I don't know the history, because I'm sure there was a lot of Indians in our family. As Morales said, his grandfather was the last Indian that the Riverside sheriff killed because he didn't want to pay taxes on the land that had been given to his family for throughout the century. So he refused to move out of the area, and the sheriff went and they killed him. This is
No,
the story
Henry,
that Morales
we
tells
don't-
us.
We don't want the sheriff to kill you, right?
yeah, my Mexican, the blood, the Indian blood is all from Mexico. It's mainly Huachichil from northern Jalisco. But we're out of time, so
Almost, go ahead.
like a minute or something.
Yeah, go ahead,
So
go ahead.
that's,
You have 30 seconds, go ahead.
So that's your claim to
well, I mean, and then there's more Indian blood from my dad's side in Guanajuato, but
Yeah.
But, it's just, that's something that's true for all Mexicanos. If you looked at the percentage of the numbers of Españoles that came to Mexico, it's a very small amount. And that kind of shows that we're basically more indigenous than European.
But we have kind of lost that.
Well, we've forgotten about it. But anyway,
Randy, I want to thank you for being with us this afternoon. It was just a great experience hearing about your dad, and I'm delighted that you made time for us, so thank you very much.
Thank you.